All right. Well, good morning.
Hi, Katie.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Yep.
Good morning and welcome back all of you to our Be Informed webinar series. If you don't remember, I'm Katie Akins, the Director of Education here at the Arizona Farm Bureau.
And I am Chelsea McGuire. I'm our Director of Government Relations. And today, Katie, I know we're really excited about this, but to be honest, I'm kind of nervous about the topic.
Why?
Well, all right, I was an ag econ major in college, so this is stuff that I feel like I should really have a grasp on because I do have a degree in it, but that was a long time and a kid ago, and so I don't remember much of any of this.
You know what? I think that's okay because as we're always told, the first step is realizing that we have a problem.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so this really smart guy one time said, know that you don't know, that's superior. So
Okay.
we definitely discovered in our promo video that I have no idea about any of this because I turned myself into
Jerry
the Wall
Maguire
Street
at
Wolf,
one point.
Jerry Maguire.
Yeah.
I became all sorts of characters from what my perception of what this topic is. So I know you and I might not understand this to its depth, and that's why I'm really, really excited today because we actually have some experts who have volunteered to come online with us today and help us through this sort of complicated topic.
Yeah.
Really. And remember all, this is a topic you asked for. We sent out an email to all the teachers and said, what is it that you would like us to talk about? What would your students like to learn about? So this one is definitely for you guys. So today our experts are going to be Eric Wilkie with Arizona Grain and also Josh Gladden with Saddle Mountain Dairy. And we'll introduce you to them a little bit later in the program.
That's right. But you know, Katie, I think before we really get too far into this topic, it probably makes sense to have a little bit of an overview, right? Like a general idea, just what exactly are we talking about today? And thankfully, we were able to find a pretty good little primer video. So let's make sure you can all hear this too.
Sometimes by a few cents, sometimes by a lot more. Why does the cost of processed foods generally stay quite stable, even though the crops that go into them have prices that fluctuate? It's partly thanks to the futures market. The futures market allows the people who sell and buy large quantities of corn to insulate you, the consumer, from those changes without going out of business themselves. Let's meet our corn producer, this farmer. Of course, she's always looking to sell her corn at a high price. And on the other side, our corn user, this cereal company, is always looking to buy corn at a low price. Now, the farmer has a little bit of a problem because her whole crop gets harvested at once. Lots and lots of farmers will be harvesting at the same time, and the huge supply can send the price falling. And even though that price might be appealing to the company that makes cereal from corn, it doesn't want to purchase all of its corn at once because, among other reasons, it would have to pay to store it. But it's fortunate that corn can be stored because that means it can be sold and bought throughout the year. And this is where the futures market fits in. Buyers and sellers move bushels around in the market, though actual corn rarely changes hands. Instead of buying and selling corn, the farmer and cereal maker buy and sell contracts. Now we're getting closer to peace of mind for both sides because a futures contract provides a hedge against a change in the price. This way, neither side is stuck with only whatever the market price is when they want to buy or sell. These contracts can be made at any time, even before the farmer plants the corn. She'll use the futures market to sell some of her anticipated crop on a certain date in the future. Of course, she's not going to sell all of her corn on that contract. just enough corn to reassure her that a low price at harvest won't ruin her business. The contract provides that security. The cereal company uses the same market to buy bushels. Their contract protects against a high price later. Contracts will gain or lose money in the futures market. If the price goes high, the farmer loses money on that futures contract because she's stuck with it. But that's okay, because now she can sell the rest of her corn, what wasn't in that contract, at the higher price. That offsets her loss in the futures market. If, at harvest time, the price of corn is low, well, that's exactly why she entered the futures market. The low price means her contract makes money, so that profit shields her from the sting of the low price she'll get for the bushels she sells now. The corn cereal company doesn't like those higher prices, and that's why they have a futures contract. They make money on it and can use that profit to cover the higher price of the corn they now need to buy. The futures market serves as a risk management tool. It doesn't maximize profit. Instead, it focuses on balance. And in this way, it keeps your cereal from breaking your weekly shopping budget.
Well, that makes sense.
It does,
On a
right?
very basic level. I'm
Very
sure
basic.
it's much more complex than that.
Yeah,
but-
definitely. Complex, and obviously corn isn't the only thing that's impacted either, right? Futures and options that we'll learn about later on are used in a handful of ag commodities, things including wheat, soybeans, oats, rice, live cattle, hogs also traded on the futures market, and class 3 milk, which is used for making cheese. All of those have the same kind of risk management structure available to them on this type of market as the corn that we just learned about.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm definitely excited to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I am too. And of course, I'm really excited that we've got some experts with us. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it and talk to the actual experts that we have here with us today. So the first one that I'm going to introduce is Eric Wilkie. And Eric is the president of Arizona Grain Incorporated, and this is a position he's held since 2006. But he's been with Arizona Grain since 1991. He is definitely a staple of this industry. If you talk about grain, people know Eric Wilkie, and so we're really excited to have him with us today. And Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chelsea and Katie, for this opportunity. So that's a great way to get started at a basic level of the video. It is accurate, but it kind of only gives a really narrow look at how futures contracts can be used and options for that part too. So let me start out, with a little bit of more information, and that is, what are the impressions of futures markets and options? For many, futures are viewed as a risky thing, or they're like gambling. And everybody has probably heard of stories about big profits and losses resulting from futures trades, sometimes in as little as hours or days. Some of the stories are true, but for millions of contracts traded daily on the 21 regulated futures exchanges, this activity is nothing like gambling. In fact, one of the main uses is to minimize risk and protect profits or transfer risk to another party who wants that risk. I grew up on a farm about 75 miles from Chicago. Merchants in Chicago developed one of the earliest regulated futures markets dating back to the 1800s. Being so close to what was the biggest market in the world, I heard a lot of stories about trading pits at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange or the Chicago Board of Trade. How the world price of corn and wheat, pork, beef, and many other commodities was set daily just miles up the road. So I went to school at the University of Illinois, and I enrolled in ag economics. One of my first elective classes was in the field of study was the economics of futures trading. At the same time, there was a movie made about two unlikely characters who decided to use the futures market, not to get rich, but to get even. At least that's what the tagline said. The actors who played the roles were Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. While hilarious, it only added to my interest in the exciting world of futures trading. If you want to have a good laugh and see that the old days of pit trader's life in action, I suggest you check out the 1983 film, Trading Places. So back to what I did. After graduating, I was given the chance to actually be a pit trader and on one of the major futures markets. And let me tell you, some days it was a full contact sport. Gone are the free-for-all days of open outcry system where people stood shoulder to shoulder and screamed and yelled and waved their arms and flashed buy and sell signals across the pit in an odd series of hand movements, all to fill orders for futures contracts. In the pit, the price of the corn crop is set by the forces of supply and demand, speculation, hedging, arbitrage, weather, geopolitics, as well as many other market factors. All of these have a bearing on the market and are constantly being considered by the market traders. Today, virtually all U.S. commodity markets have moved to an electronic platform. Now, every trader in the pit that can be in the pit if they have an account and a computer. Till about 15 years ago, futures markets were only open 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Today, trading is taking place nearly 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. At first, there was a lot of resistance to those changes, but we have found that this has only improved the efficiency of the markets to perform the function that they do and to keep up with world events on a nearly 24-hour basis. Let me give you a few comments about the company I work for. Arizona Grain is engaged in many facets of Arizona and U.S. agriculture. We're a seed company, a feed company, a grain trading and merchandising company, a transportation company. We're an applied biotech and seed research and development company. We clean, condition, and trade forage crop seeds. We produce value-added ranch feeds, and we produce and market wild bird seed for the consumer markets. All of these consumer products are sold through places like Costco, Ace Hardware, Tractor Supply, Walmart, and other national retailers. We operate facilities in 5 western states. Our ag customers are dairies, feed yards, egg producers, production farming operation, wheat millers, pasta producers, and ranchers. All but our biotech and research company faces price risk, so we utilize futures and options to manage that price risk. Futures and options are traded on by different types of market participants. Some or all of these participants are present in the market at any one time. Keep in mind that not all traders of futures contracts have the same objective. Let's look at some of those designations. A hedger. This is a person who trades futures to hedge or offset price risk. A speculator. They buy or sell futures at one time to make a profit by taking one side of the market at a time. A scalper. You guys have probably all heard the term day trader. Well, that's kind of what a scalper is. They're like a speculator. They take one side of the market, but they hold the positions for seconds, minutes, but not more than one trading session. And in today's world of computers, sometimes positions are held for just microseconds before they change their positions. There's the spread trader. This person is arbitraging the difference in contracts. They buy one contract and sell another to capture a change in the relationship. And that would be over time. So they would buy a December corn contract, for instance, and sell a March corn contract. They're both going to go up and down, but they're going to change at a slightly different rate. And they arbitrage that difference in those two contracts. There's a crush trader, and that might be an example of a soybean crushing operation. And we all know soybeans are used in animal feed, to produce animal feed, as well as salad dressings and things like that. Well, the oil seed is crushed and turned into meal and oil, as an example. So a crush trader might buy one contract of soybeans and sell meal and sell oil. And they would arbitrage those relationships as a hedge to their physical crushing operations. Then there's a delivery warehouse operator. This is a house, an elevator, a warehouse that is what we call regular for delivery, and that means that a futures contract, if held to expiration, will be converted to physical bushels in a warehouse at the delivery point. And so there's economics in that of the price you can buy it on the futures market versus that it would trade in the cash or local markets. And so there's people that just arbitrage those values back and forth. If it's cheap in the cash market, they'll buy cash and sell futures. If it's cheap in the futures markets, they would buy futures and sell in the local delivery markets. And so those are being arbitraged. So there are many types of participants, but as you can see, there's quite a few different kinds. But to get into the other ones, well, we'll just save that for a future discussion. I hope you caught the pun. Okay, So all these different traders are vital and the platform and perform a function that leads to an efficient discovery of price. Removing any one of these types of traders and the function of the market is weakened and the market is less efficient, has greater volatility and therefore greater risk. There is a market referee, and that is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which establishes the rules and regulations of the futures markets to guard against manipulation and practices that would compromise the function of the free market and the transparent price discovery. The CFTC oversees the exchanges, approves any changes to the contracts, sets position limits, and the financial requirements for participation, amongst other things. Let's take a look at the important features of a futures contract. Every contract traded in a specific commodity for a specific delivery month has exactly the same specifications and quantity, including the same delivery terms. For the whole system to work, a futures contract price must converge on the physical market price at the delivery point of the contract on the last trading day of the futures contract. An example, on the last trading day of a Chicago Board of Trade December corn contract, the price must equal the local corn market price at the delivery warehouse in Chicago on the last day. While futures contracts may seem to be notional or just a piece of paper that is bought and sold to transfer risk, the futures contract must be anchored in the real value of corn. Convergence assures this. One more critical feature of a futures contract is the specifications, and they are standardized. So I'll give you an example of the basic CBOT corn future specifications. They're always US number 2 yellow corn. They have a moisture content. They have a quantity, in this case 5,000 bushels, or if you like tons, it's 140 tons. And the delivery point is FOB, a Chicago delivery warehouse. CBOT corn futures months are December, March, May, July, and September. So you buy a contract specific to the month, but this allows you to buy a contract that is going to be as close as possible to the cash transaction or the physical transaction that you're trying to hedge. So you pick the one that's closest to, let's say, if I'm going to sell corn to a feed yard in Arizona, I would choose to hedge my transaction in December corn because that's the same month. Okay, but the one thing about every contract is the only thing that's different about any of the contracts is the price. The specifications are always the same. And it's pretty easy to see if the specifications were different, then the price would be different. And we want to discover one price, and that is the price of this quantity and quality of corn in Chicago at a future date. So the only thing that changes is price. So how does Arizona Grain use futures and options? Arizona Grain primarily uses futures to manage price risk. We are a hedger. We have a trader whose job title is risk manager. As the title implies, this person is responsible for the management of risk, specifically price risk of the company's commodity positions. In this case, risk is defined as an unfavorable change in price of a commodity that we own or have committed to sell for delivery to a customer, but we don't yet own, or vice versa. We regularly hedge wheat, corn, milo, soy meal, cottonseed, ethanol, ocean freight, diesel fuel, foreign currency, natural gas, and milk. And each one of these, pretty much each one of these have its individual futures contract, or they can be cross-hedged, such as corn and milo. They're interchangeable, not for delivery, but the hedge function is the same. So we deal with a lot of different futures contracts. So let me give you an example of risk and one way we use futures to manage risk. So let me give you one scenario. So a feed yard asks Arizona Grain for a price of corn for a month's supply, let's say 10,000 ton for December delivery. Today, Arizona Grain can make an offer to the feed yard based on what we can buy 10,000 tons of corn delivered in December. This is a simple back-to-back trade. As long as we perform the purchase and the sale at the same time, there is, in theory, no risk. So we would buy 10,000 at $5 as an example. We'd sell 10,000 at $5 plus our margin, which would equal the sales price. There's no exposure to a price change, and the margin is earned for the service. This is simple, no need to use futures. So let's look at another scenario. Now, a feed yard wants to buy only 5,000 tons for December, but Arizona Grain, to get the best price, has to buy 10,000 at one time. And that's kind of the quantity in a 100-car shuttle train, and that's basically how Arizona moves the majority of its corn into the state. So for the 5,000 tons that we bought and sold at the same time, the margin is earned and there's no risk position. But we have this extra 5,000 tons for December that we don't have a buyer for yet. So the risk is the potential change in the price from today until we sell the remaining 5,000 tons. So in trader language, we have a surplus or we're long 5,000 tons. In this case, our risk position is long 5,000 tons. But think about this, for every 1 cent the market goes down, we would lose basically $1,800 on this long. Of course, the market goes, if it went up, we could gain that much. But to get that opportunity, we'd have to take a risk of loss. And that is speculation. And as a hedger, we're not interested in speculation. So as a risk manager uses futures contracts to hedge this long, selling a futures contract on the CBOT in an equal quantity for the same period of time. Just as you saw in the video, if the market goes down, the long grain position will lose money, but the short futures contracts make an equal gain. Therefore, the company is hedged and there is no market risk on this position. Just to kind of repeat, a hedge is entering into a futures contract in an equal and opposite side of the market as the position you hold in the physical commodity. In this scenario, you can see that we can buy and sell different physical quantities of grain, hedge the difference, and not be exposed to price changes that could result in the loss that exceeds the margin we charge between the purchase and the sale. Okay, now let's talk about options, and I'll keep it simple. Option contracts are contracts that give the owner the right, but not the obligation, to buy or sell the underlying futures contract at a certain price. Now that's kind of complex. I try to keep it simple, but let's break it down a little bit more. Option contracts are either a put, which is a sell contract, or a call, which is a buy contract. Options can either be bought or sold, and that's called writing contract or writing options. If the party is selling option contracts, they are said to be writing a put or writing a call. And if you're writing options, you are giving the buyer these rights to exercise the option on your futures contract. For writing the options, the contract seller is paid an option premium for taking that risk. So Arizona Grain might use them in this way. Let's say we have wheat growers and we want to offer them a minimum price. And that sounds good because that way the farmer sells wheat at a minimum price to us. But if from the time they sell it until the crop is delivered and the market goes up, the price to be paid to the grower will also go up. Arizona Grain would exercise the option on the long futures contract at a lower price than the current market. By then selling the exercise futures option, we can use the profit to pay the farmer the higher price. Arizona Grain still benefits from owning the wheat at the minimum price. To offer this feature, Arizona Grain might base the contract on an option strategy of buying a call on a wheat futures contract. This hedges the downside in the market for the farmer, but leaves the upside unhedged. Or as another example, we could offer a dairy a corn contract that fixes a maximum price but allows the dairy to buy corn cheaper if the market falls. In this case, we would base the max price on an option strategy of buying a put on a corn contract. I won't go any deeper here as we need a whole bunch more time to learn more. But there are some really great tutorials available on the CME's website, and you can find that at thecmegroup.com. There are many different scenarios that you can imagine where futures and options can be used. Just remember, as a hedger controlling risk, the goal is to earn the expected margin, okay, and not speculate and take those risks. Hedgers actually do face a little bit of fractional risk, and there is always basis risk. And what is basis risk? Basis is the price difference between the futures contract price and the price of a commodity that is being hedged. Okay, so it's the difference in the price of a corn contract in Chicago and physical corn in Arizona. As an example, let's take today, October the 19th. So if we sold the futures contract at $4 today, okay, that's our short, we have physical corn that we're long in our warehouse in Arizona, and the price here is $5.25. So the basis is the difference in those two prices, which is easy to see as $1.25. But let's say the cost of rail freight from Iowa to Arizona goes down by 2 cents a bushel by November 10th, but there is no change in the price of the corn futures. So if we look at that example, CBOT December corn contracts November 10th still priced at $4, but as I said, the freight got cheaper to go from Iowa to Arizona, so our physical corn supply is 2 cents less, okay? So the difference in the basis in this case is $1.23. So even though the grain was hedged and the basis on the long has lost 2 cents per bushel, even though the futures did not change. Basis risk is something that cannot be hedged. The good news is that basis risk is relatively low and changes gradually over time, so it can be managed. As you can see, we're just skimming the surface, and it takes active management of a position to be a successful hedger, as the transactions need to be made every time a purchase and sale is made. Timing is critical. Otherwise, instead of being a hedger, you become a speculator, and the market move can be financially costly. So using futures contracts require capital. If your capital is borrowed, then your lender should understand your risk management plan. Lenders are not typically interested in learning or lending to traders who are speculators, as this entails risk they're unwilling to take. Even if you are a hedger, and the lender must trust that your futures or option strategy is correlated to the basic business transaction. A lender has to understand that margin calls are being offset by gains in the opposite side of the market. Using futures and options allows a trader to take much larger transactions over longer periods of time without facing higher risks. An example is that we can offer a dairy customer corn for months or even multiple years at fixed prices even before we can buy the actual corn from farmers. Use of futures and options allow us to offer contract price risk tools to our customers, and that can be a competitive advantage. So to wrap up, futures and options are a valuable tool that, if understood and employed correctly, can create value and reduce unwanted risk for both sides of any commodity transaction and are vital to the functioning and efficiency of markets. It's my hope that some of you will take what you've heard today and go learn more about futures and options. So, Chelsea and Katie, thanks for this opportunity, and I guess at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for some questions.
Absolutely. Eric, thank you. That was so just helpful and laid out with those really easy to follow examples. And I know I learned a lot of refresher from my courses as well. We did have one question come through on the live Q&A that I wanted to get out while we've got some time here. And that is, you use the term price discovery and then also risk management. So does that mean that futures aren't actually part of setting the price of that product, but they're just part of managing the risk of that price? How do those two things play together?
Yeah, so when I say the words price discovery, okay, price is could be discovered anywhere, and that's just a buyer and a seller agreeing to complete a transaction. So if I'm the only participant in the market in the whole world, and as Arizona Grain, I'm going to sell corn, and there's one, let's say, feed yard, and we agree, we shake hands and say the price of corn today is, I'll sell you my corn and you'll buy my corn for $5. That's price discovery. Okay, but obviously there's a lot of players in the market and we're all interconnected. The corn that I buy for Arizona Grain, I'm competing with an ethanol plant in Iowa or the Chinese who want to import corn. So because it's a commodity and the grain can go any direction and be used by any player who utilizes corn, there needs to be some universal nature to price. And because if the Chinese are paying 10 times what I'm paying, I won't be able to buy any corn. Okay, so I need to know what the corn price is, and the futures markets help that happen. If you remember, I talked about all the different kinds of players in the market, and what is that? That is a place where all buyers and sellers have an opportunity to come together and bid for the price of corn. So futures markets are really vital, that they are a very efficient market of bringing buyers and sellers together to all agree or try to agree what the price of corn is, and the way you agree is that you make a transaction. So Chicago futures for corn, for instance, is a price point that if a price is set there, then you can utilize that price and go anywhere in the world, and figure out, okay, I'm $1 a bushel of freight from Chicago to Arizona, for instance, and that's just hypothetical. So if corn in Chicago is 4, then corn in Arizona is 5. So effectively, Chicago has set the world price of corn. That's trying to keep it simple. So that's what I was referring to. And futures markets, again, are highly efficient, because if there's any disparity, somebody's either going to buy it because they think it's cheap, or they're going to sell it because they think it's high. And so when you get all these people doing it, you get to a really sharp determination of price.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for that. If you'll stay on with us, we'll wait and after Josh presents and make sure that there aren't any further questions. But with that, Katie, would you like to introduce our next guest?
I'd be happy to. Thanks again, Eric. But now we are going to be moving to Josh Gladden of Saddle Mountain Dairy. He's on the left-hand side of our picture here, and you'll see his smiling face on the screen here as well. Saddle Mountain Dairy is a multi-generation farm and dairy located in Palo Verde, Arizona. They have about 5,000 milk cows, and they also raise 4,000 heifers and grow forage crops on about 2,500 acres. Josh manages the dairy operations, and his dad and brother manage the crop operations. Josh, we're very excited to have you joining us here this morning to talk a little bit about how your family uses futures and options as part of the business plan on your dairy there. So welcome.
Thanks for having me this morning. I appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, on the dairy, and Eric did a great job presenting on this, and his company definitely deals in this a lot more than we do, but it has become over the past few years an important part of our operation, and one that we think is going to continue to play a big role. And I'll kind of just touch on how we use the futures and options, but also some other things, and we kind of look at it all together as risk management for the dairy. So on the dairy, every day we produce milk that's shipped every day, and then we sell that milk every day, and it's turned into fluid milk, cheese, and other dairy products. And to produce that milk, we have to feed the cows a lot of food. That's where they get their nutrition from, and that's what they do to convert that feed into milk. And so the price of the milk that we sell and the cost of the feed that we feed are the two biggest factors that tie into the profitability of the dairy. And so that milk and the feed, and especially the grain portion of the feed, the corn and soybean meal that we feed, are commodities, and they can have big price swings up and down, which can be good or can be bad, depending on what it is and when it is. And since these are both the milk and these grain feeds are commodities, you call us more what we call price takers. We can't always set the price of milk. It's a supply and demand market. And so even though it might cost us $15 to produce 100 pounds of milk, we might get paid more than that, or we might get paid less than that. And so we have to figure out a way to manage that risk and be able to continue to stay in business to keep doing what we do. And so there's a few different risk management tools that we use on a regular basis here at the dairy. The futures and options that Eric talked about that we use quite a bit, and we'll touch on that a little bit. I don't have any slides on the next two, but we'll definitely touch on them. We can also do it by physically buying or selling the product. Physically buying or selling the product, we can't do that on milk. So with milk, we have to use one of the other options, because where we ship our milk to, we can't forward contract that milk at a given price. But the grain side, corn or soybean meal, we definitely can. We could go to Eric in Arizona Grain and say, we want to buy this much product for December delivery at this price, if we think it's a good price. And that would help us manage that risk. Then we know what our cost of those feeds are for that time frame, and we can plug that in to look at our overall margin. There's also a newer tool, at least on the dairy side. It's been around on the crop sides for a while, but there's some revenue insurance programs that we can look at. And really, I guess you could look at risk management all together as insurance in a way. You're trying to make sure that you can provide yourself a margin to continue to stay in business and be profitable. So on the revenue insurance programs, those are very much straightforward like insurance. And so those are new to the dairy, but they become a big part of our risk management the last few years. And those programs entail us basically saying, this is how much milk we produce in certain time frames. And then they offer an insurance product that would be based off the future markets, those prices, but then you can basically insure a certain level. You can't insure 100% of what that would be, but you can insure a portion of what that price is to protect that price from going lower. And so that's one other way. But since we're talking about futures and options, we'll go a little bit more into that and how we use that on the dairy. So on the exchanges, like Eric said, we can buy and sell futures and option contracts for milk and different dairy products. Basically covers most of the ways that we would have our milk used, cheese, powder, all types of different things, butter, whey protein. And then we can buy and sell the futures and options for the main feed ingredients, which are corn and soybean meal. And so, like I said earlier, these three combinations, milk, selling that, and buying feed, have the biggest effect on our overall margin. You know, there's a lot of other costs that go into running the dairy, but these factors have the biggest effect. In fact, feed can be up to 50 to 60% of our total expense on the dairy. So it's very important to manage our risk there relative to what we're able to sell our milk for. And so while lots of those other costs can remain fairly stable, they change over time, but these ones have the most opportunity to change rapidly, and sometimes that's to the good and sometimes that's to the bad. And in fact, as an example, this year with some of the things going on with COVID, we've seen some of the highest milk prices we've seen in the last few years within the last 6 months, and we've also seen some of the lowest prices we've seen over the last 10 years in the last 6 months. So that paint you a little bit of picture of what that risk is and why we want to manage that. Because while the upside is good, selling milk for $10 when it costs us $15 to produce makes it very difficult to stay in business for very long. So when we're looking at price risk management, we're looking at our overall margin most of the time, but that is comprised, like I said, mainly of the milk and the feed costs. And so in general, we want to sell milk at good prices and we want to buy feed at lower prices. But when we're looking at that, it's our overall margin. Milk doesn't have to be super, super high if feed is at a reasonable price, and vice versa. If feed's high, then we need milk to be high. But we're looking at our overall margin and what we think makes us profitable, and if we can lock that in or protect that margin in deferred time periods, so that when we get to that time, if the price has changed, especially to the negative, we can stay at a better price and a better margin. So on the milk side, sorry, lost my place for a second. So with the options, and I'm going to talk a little bit mainly about milk and when we use options and futures. So on the milk side, we're going to use options when we have a good margin that we want to protect, but we also probably need some flexibility over a longer time period. They provide us a little more options. Like Eric said, if we buy a put option for milk, then we can set a price floor for it, but then we can also participate if the market goes higher. So we might insure at a level at $15, but if the price goes to $20, we're able to capitalize on that. On the flip side, on the futures market, we're going to mainly in our operation use it when the price of the commodity is extreme, when it's very, very high, and we like that price a lot. But we want the strongest protection. If milk's at $20, then that's a really good price historically, and we know, or we are guessing at that time, that there's a better chance of milk going down than going higher because it's at such a high price. A couple of the benefits of the options and the downsides to the options. So For us in our operation, options offer us the most flexibility. If the market moves, we're not locked in at a price, but we've set some price minimums, but we can always participate in those higher prices on the milk side. The disadvantage of those options is you can't have anything for free, right? We'd love to set a floor, but not pay for it and not cost anything. But obviously that's not going to incentivize anyone else to make that contract with us. So like Eric said, you have to pay for that option. So if we buy a put option, then we're paying them for that price minimum and the option or the ability for the price to go up. So, but with that, the options can be expensive at times, depending on the time frame and the volatility of the market. And even though they can be very good tools to manage that, there's a lot of times that they do expire worthless. You know, if the price is similar or hasn't gone below. So you basically paid for some insurance that you didn't capitalize on. But like I said, that's why we consider, you know, kind of like an insurance policy. On futures, with the positives and negatives, so the futures for us, it's the strongest protection. You know, if a price is extreme, either milk high or feed really low, then maybe we want to lock that price in. The benefit is there's no cost. We're not paying them for that opportunity. We're just agreeing to a set price. But the disadvantage is you are setting a price cap on milk if we're talking about milk. So if we sold that at $20 and the market goes up to $24, then we don't get to participate in that $4 of additional gain. We actually have to pay whoever took the other side of that contract that $4 of that additional gain. So they both have their places. We use both of them. I would say that we definitely use options a little bit more than futures, but at this point in time, going up to a year to 18 months out, we are using both tools to manage that risk. So let's talk just a minute about how we execute that risk management. We work with a broker. So I have a gentleman in Chicago I work with that is there and works closely with the commodity markets. And so we will work together to evaluate those margins, and then I will go through him and he will help me, he'll facilitate the buying and selling of those futures and option contracts. We utilize a broker because they work with the market a lot more than we do on a daily basis. You can do it yourself, but they're working with other producers on a daily basis, so they have a lot of exposure to what's going on and how it's working. And they also offer some services. So in their website or their some of the tools they offer us, we can put in every facet of our operation: how much milk we make, how many cows we're milking, how much feed we're feeding, what those feed costs are, what our other costs are, and then it'll give us basically what our profit margin is at that point in time, and also forecast that profit margin out in the future months. And so that's what we decide. And so we meet weekly to go over those markets and our positions. And if the margin is looking good and we like it, then we'll add positions. If there's anything, we can adjust positions. But we're constantly looking at that on a continuing basis to decide where we sit, if we like what the market's offering us in the future, and if we want to protect that price or that margin in the future. So just kind of to sum it up, we think it's a vital part of our organization. Think that it's going to be even more important going forward as some of the margins narrow and the marketplace becomes more competitive. And we can never take all the risk out of the production of dairy products, but with some of these tools, we can minimize some of our bigger risk factors. And ideally, if we're executing this correctly and as a true hedger, then we'll hopefully be able to provide us a little bit of more steady margins over time that we can plan on, budget on, and allow us to continue to operate in the long term. And that's all I've got.
Well, Josh, thanks for that. I really think it was interesting, at least for us to hear sort of from Eric's perspective on the hedger side of things, and then hear more on the on-farm level, how you guys use these tools, to work with Saddle Mountain Dairy. is there a story or an example of a time, this was a question we got from the Q&A as well, of when this really did save you, you know, when you had some of these risk management tools in place and you look back and say, yep, we're still in business, or, you know, that really saved us during this period of time?
Yeah, so the quickest one that comes to mind is just the last 6 months. I mean, the price, the really low milk price did not last long enough that it probably would have put us out of business, but said it got down to about $10, and that's very much below our cost of production.
Yeah.
But with some of the tools that we had on and some of the opportunities the market had given us, maybe say a year ago or something when we were evaluating those positions, we were able to have most of our milk hedged in the $16 to $17 range. So when our paycheck was actually paying us $10 a hundredweight in our hedge account, we were actually capturing, you know, quite a bit of that to make up. So we didn't see a true $10 pay price. You know, we were more in the $16 range, which is definitely a big difference and helped tremendously.
Absolutely. Well, you know, thanks to both of you for this, for sharing how you use it in your everyday life and way that in everyday life and business. And we're going to put your contact information both for Eric and Josh up on the screen really quickly. I know we've got high school students who probably have even more insightful questions than the ones that we got, and hopefully, you know, they'll be able to take this and, like Eric said, take an interest in this and really make this something that they look at and do later on in their careers. But Eric, Josh, we just want to say once again, thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. We appreciate it. We're thankful for what you do for our industry for sure. And if you guys have any parting words, now's the time.
Well, again, thank you, Katie, Chelsea, and the listeners, you know, for being inquisitive about what this is. It's something that's kind of behind the scenes, but if you're ever thinking about being involved in agriculture and understanding of this is really important. So thank you again.
Definitely.
Yep, thanks for the opportunity. Enjoyed getting to share a little bit about it. So
awesome. Well,
thanks, guys. We appreciate you.
We do very much. And everybody who's on with us, remember, if you're watching this on a recording, you can always contact Katie and I as well for future questions. Our next webinar will be next month.
And it's on urban agriculture. It'll be interesting. I'm excited.
Probably a little less technical than this one.
Very much so. You don't need a vocabulary sheet for the next one, but I do enjoy the vocabulary we received today.
Indeed. This was great. Well, thanks everybody, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Eric, we